Thanks, David. Good morning, everyone. The most crucial part of my research topic really is turning water into cash flow, and the action of this is through double cropping with centre pivot irrigation. In 2010 and 2012, my irrigated farm in the South Burnett was inundated with record-breaking flood levels. The water level was so deep that my ute in the photo here would have been completely submerged. To minimise the devastating financial impact of crop loss from flooding, I've been developing a resilient double cropping program with the goal of achieving a sustainable rotation that is not only a financially safe option, but that is also the most profitable option. A Nuffield Scholarship offered the perfect pathway for me to further research and develop this system. I'd like to thank Nuffield Australia for putting their faith in me and awarding me with this life-changing scholarship opportunity. The contacts that Nuffield have across the world has provided the sort of experience that money simply cannot buy. That being said, there is a significant financial cost to travel abroad and meet all of these incredible people, and I'd like to thank GRDC for investing in Nuffield Australia and myself. The Nuffield program is challenging, not just for the scholars, but also for their families, and I'd like to thank my wife Edwina for supporting me through this epic endeavour. Between my Nuffield travels, work and a 2-week family holiday, I spent more than 6 months away over a 13-month period. Dorothy McKellar's 1911 poem, My Country, describes Australia as the land of droughts and flooding rains. This couldn't be more accurate for Queensland in recent history, with much of the state being drought declared, while also suffering 2 major widespread record flooding events during the same period. This fluctuation in rainfall, along with increasing environmental demand and legislative changes, has driven massive innovation and advancement in Australian irrigated practices, particularly over the last 2 decades. And in recent years, there has been significant increase in the area irrigated with centre pivots and lateral move irrigation systems. The 2 leading factors driving the adoption of these systems have been water and labour savings. The other extreme of our weather, being flooding, is still fresh in the memory of many Queenslanders. At the peak of the 2010-11 summer floods, 3/4 of the state was flood affected, including 86 Queensland towns and cities. One expert compared to all of France and Germany being underwater. There's some pretty catchy news headlines getting around, with the likes of Rockhampton, the beef city, gets covered in brown gravy, and Bundaberg sugar gets spilled in the soup. Sadly, thank you. Sadly, it was less than 2 years later that Queensland would encounter more widespread major flooding, and for some irrigation regions like Theodore, it would be the 3rd flood in as many years. I've no doubt that farming on the fertile but flood-prone alluvial plains will continue to attract farmers. And given that flooding and droughts are part of life in Queensland, it will be crucial for these farmers to be smart and practical in their approach for planning ahead of these events. One of my objectives was to provide information that will assist farmers with a low risk capacity to plan a high yield double cropping rotation for their centre pivot irrigation. Farm businesses may have a low risk capacity for a number of reasons, but typically this will be linked to a high debt level, which is common for farmers that are just starting out or recovering from a devastating natural disaster. For these businesses, factors like cash flow may play a more important role when assessing cropping options, rather than choosing the crop with the highest potential gross margin. My solution for increasing cash flow is through double cropping, which is the practice of consecutively producing 2 crops on the same land within the same growing year, and it is common practice in many parts of the world. One of the advantages is the spread of income across the year. If one crop fails, there is still income from the other crop. And also, after the delay of crop destruction to planting the next crop is then thereby reduced, and bringing the next harvest or income around faster, which can be crucial in the recovery from devastating natural disasters. I focused my research on regions that are renowned for their successful and long-term double cropping programs, like Brazil and the North China Plains. I also spent a lot of time in the USA, which is the birthplace of centre pivots and where Australia's major centre pivot suppliers are based. The whole Nuffield experience has allowed me to visit 14 countries, where not only have I researched cropping systems and overhead irrigation, but I have also gained an excellent insight into the diversity of agriculture and the people involved in the industry right across the globe. Brazil was the highlight for me. The summer cropping, the irrigation, the machinery was all incredibly exciting, and by the time I left I could basically speak Portuguese. Tre aqua, por favor, albeit no one could understand my Queensland accent. The place is literally an irrigator's paradise, complete with palm trees around pump stations, and the further irrigation development potential there is just jaw-dropping. Travelling through Bahia, it was clear to see the immense scale of farming operations, and it really did live up to the fantastic photos that I'd seen before the visit, just like this one here of a heap of headers harvesting soybeans, followed closely behind with tractors planting corn. There's plenty of heat units and plenty of water for growing high-yielding crops, so when investigating double cropping, where else would you start than Brazil? The summer crop growing season there is much longer than in southeast Queensland, so they're mainly producing two summer crops, commonly soybean and corn or soybean and cotton, as opposed to my rotation at home of a winter and summer crop. Importantly though, the advantages of their double cropping system can still apply to our farming systems at home. The big Brazilian farming operations believe that double cropping allows them to increase the profitability of their land, diversify the production and commercial risk, and enhance operational efficiencies through better utilisation of machinery, freight, labour and other resources, resulting in a dilution of their fixed costs. Also, one of the keys to success of a lot of the large-scale farming businesses there is the geographic spread of farmland across different regions of South America, which allows them to minimise risk exposure to weather-related losses. The Brazilian farmers that I visited all seem to have a great understanding of their soil's nutrition and characteristics, and they're really growing great yields on what I would have considered fairly poor-looking soils. You can see in the photo here that the farming soil just isn't really too different from the beach sand on Copacabana. And with 1,600 mil of annual rainfall, the free draining qualities of this sandy soil is actually quite beneficial with regard to limiting the waterlogging of crops. Double cropping is common practice in Brazil and needs to be carefully managed. The tropical climate and cropping frequency presents large challenges with regard to pest and disease control. Like farmers anywhere else in the world, commodity prices have a big impact on planting decisions, and when soybean prices are high, the temptation for farmers to double crop soybeans straight back into soybean ground can be large. To prevent this from happening, the Brazilian government enforced a 90-day phytosanitary period, which excludes farmers from planting soybeans during this period. The goal is to prevent the spread of pests and diseases that threaten not only soybeans, but also corn and cotton, after studies have revealed that a soybean monoculture and lack of rotation has contributed to past outbreaks. The cotton crop in this photo had been sprayed 35 times, including herbicides, insecticides and fungicides. I think it really raised a big question around the resistance management practices in place there. My visit to China was excellent. I was fortunate enough to interact with people from many different levels of agriculture. I learned about their culture and their farming practices, and the trip was truly an amazing experience. The region I visited was the North China Plains, where double cropping corn and wheat started in the 1970s and became more popular in the 1980s as advances in mechanisation and fertilisers improved, and also with the adoption of shorter season cultivars. They have a colder winter than we get in Queensland, which may be beneficial in terms of preventing fusarium build-up. But I think that after more than 40 years of double cropping, the Chinese farmers have proven that a continuous corn-wheat rotation can be sustainable with regard to pest and disease control. The uptake of modern management techniques like water budgeting, irrigation scheduling and growth regulator application was low. The localised research has been done and the information available was excellent, but I think the challenge there seemed to be in the extension and education of the farmers. The sprayer in this photo here was a common sight, not only working in the fields, but also on the road as a form of transport, which is in stark contrast to the bullet train you saw on the slide before. This particular sprayer had just finished spraying a trial wheat plot, and there was 20% of its nozzles completely blocked. Timing is crucial for their wheat-corn system to work, and commonly they harvest the corn there by the cob at high moisture and store in very small mesh silos like this one here to dry down. Taking the crop off at high moisture achieves an earlier harvest and allows them time to do their ground preparation before the next wheat crop is planted. Harvesting corn at high moisture is common in other parts of the world too, like Eastern Europe and the USA. However, there was limited use of the product in Australia, with only one feedlot currently using the product on the Darling Downs. Feedlotters note that supply is a major limitation to further use of the product, and farmers need to be in relatively close proximity due to the freight costs and the inability to store the high moisture grain in traditional silos on farm. Harvesting the corn at 30% moisture can shorten the growing season up by 3 weeks or more, and this opens up the potential for another summer crop to be direct drilled and watered up. A potential rotation that resembles the Brazilian system of soybean corn is high moisture corn followed by mungbeans. The 2-crop rotation would grow from September to May with 3 months fallow over the winter, and would give the added advantage of including a legume into the rotation. Including a legume will fix nitrogen into the soil and therefore reduce the synthetic nitrogen requirement for the following crop. Getting crop nutrition right is paramount with double cropping. The increased cropping intensity can result in the progressive depletion of soil nutrients, requiring more fertiliser to replace lost nutrition. Getting crop nutrition right will not only help to maximise yield and prevent unnecessary overspending on input costs, but it can help limit the impact of agriculture on the environment. Agriculture is responsible for an estimated 85% of Australia's nitrous oxide emissions, which is a greenhouse gas with almost 300 times the potency of carbon dioxide. Research in Queensland has shown that growing legumes in rotation with grain crops is an effective strategy for reducing nitrous oxide emissions without reducing yields. The research shows that the optimum nitrogen rate for the following dryland cereal crop can be reduced by half, and the nitrous oxide emissions by about 2/3 compared to back-to-back cereals. Along with these benefits, a diverse selection of crops will also help to increase soil biological activity and diversity, and it will also allow for alternating chemistry to be used, and hence slowing the onset of herbicide resistance. I love irrigating with centre pivots. They're just so simple, and I enjoyed investigating the management practices of irrigators in South Africa, the USA, Brazil and Australia. And I've summarised some of the considerations that I believe are crucial to achieve optimum results from the irrigation system. Firstly, you need to keep the thing moving, and that means not letting this happen. Many of the farmers that I've spoken to have all said that bogging has been an issue early on with their systems, but with perseverance solutions can be found. And this is a novel example of a homemade wheel I saw in South Africa. Paddock drainage is critical, as it is with any form of irrigation, to prevent waterlogging and its effect on crop yield and nitrogen loss. One of the biggest contributing factors to the water savings achieved from overhead irrigation is their ability to maximise rainfall capture and minimise waterlogging, and this needs to be achieved through precise irrigation scheduling. Centre pivots have a low labour requirement to start with, but the value of this can easily be multiplied with the use of automation and telemetry. Fertigation with centre pivots is an easy and uniform way to apply fertiliser, in particular nitrogen. I visited a farm in South Africa where they were growing a corn-wheat double cropping rotation, and they were applying 100% of their nitrogen requirements through the irrigation system. Zero tillage and controlled traffic, which really go hand in hand, the combination improves infiltration and results in less runoff and more even moisture storage across the paddock. And they also promote good soil structure, which can reduce waterlogging. And also from an operational standpoint, zero till and controlled traffic facilitate the conditions to perform most of the operations on time, such as planting, spraying and harvesting. And this improves the probability of planting each crop at the optimum moment. The cost of electricity is a big issue for farmers all around the world. In Brazil, farmers only irrigate for 20 hours per day due to the prohibitive cost of electricity during the 4 hours of highest energy demand by the large cities. At these times, the cost of electricity is so great that it simply becomes uneconomical to use for agriculture. On Australian irrigated cotton farms, the electricity cost per hectare has increased by 90% on the 10-year average. And pumping water accounts for roughly half to 3/4 of all on-farm direct energy consumption. With this in mind, any improvement in irrigation energy efficiency can significantly reduce the total farm energy bill. Centre pivots that are on mains power supply are ideally suited to converting to solar power. The energy source is all localised in one central position next to the pump station, which is the ideal position for locating solar panels. As the technology improves, this will become a valuable and renewable tool for reducing the cost of irrigating. My vision is for a centre pivot controlled by telemetry and completely powered by solar power. The labour cost would be minimal and the electricity cost would be nil. To wrap things up, I'd just like to touch on some of the key messages and recommendations for my presentation. Forward planning a fertiliser program is critical, as a crop that lacks nutrition at key growth stages will never reach its full potential. My time in Brazil and the USA highlighted the importance of a good integrated pest, weed and disease management plan in order to prevent the build-up of resistance. I think there is potential to further develop the high moisture corn market in Australia, and this would open up enhanced opportunities for double cropping of 2 consecutive summer crops. With the upward trend in electricity pricing, I'd like to see continued research and investment into alternative energy solutions for irrigation pumping. And in the meantime, it will be imperative for irrigators and our representative bodies to influence policy around irrigation electricity use. Thank you.